All right, so we're rolling on another episode of the Love That podcast. My name is Diego, and I want to thank everybody for listening in once again. We had a pretty awesome first show, I would say. I loved having that as the first episode. I thought listening back to it that the subject matter was jarring maybe to some, but I felt it was a very relatable topic because I feel like a lot of people, especially people that I know, would have a lot to say about it because they would have their own experiences and perceptions about the Catholic Church and its posture on a lot of things, and just gender identity in general, what people's perception or ideas surrounding that are. So for today's episode, the subject matter is maybe going to be a little bit less intense, but it is still a hot button issue. I would say something that gets talked about a lot in the media, in the news, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's had this conversation with family members and close friends, and that is the idea surrounding political correctness and PC culture in general. I thought this topic would be a good one because it's multifaceted. There's a lot of angles to go about it. You can talk about the media representation angle of it and what depictions of people are allowed and permissible or seemed as okay or in good light versus negative light and derogatory, and what's that line look like. And then there's also the language optic of it, which is like what you can and cannot say anymore, perceived to be like policing language. There's also the more moral views and ideological views, which tend to be like policies surrounding how you view minorities and other oppressed groups, but also like the corporate policies, like for example labor laws or human rights or women's rights. You know, there's a lot of layers to it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into that conversation. Now, political correctness in its definition is a noun and is defined as the avoidance, often considered as taking to extremes of forms of expression or action that are perceived to exclude, marginalize, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against. The example they have is women like him for his civil rights stand and political correctness. So in essence, political correctness is just to, I guess, toe the line of what is deemed to be moral and fair in society. So like what the general public deems as morally okay. The baseline, I guess. Now, political correctness has probably not been a thing before the age of the internet. I feel like with the information overload that there is on the web now, there's just so much access to information and ways of educating yourself to where there's really not a space anymore, or at least there's not a perceived space for an education when you can basically any question can be answered on the internet. And if not, you can at least find a way to get on your way to finding the answer through the internet. There's just so many modalities and so many ways to get about doing that. So personally, I feel that political correctness is just a fancy way of saying this is a baseline for how to be a decent human being in the society that we're in, which I think is why the word political correctness is there, because politics like change over time. They tend to not stay the same for too long, especially nowadays that we're in democracies and republics versus kingdoms, versus the olden days, where it was a lot more monolithic in thought, where a lot more diverse in not only in people but in thinking. And if you're starting to question yourself a little bit, like, his tone seems a little bit dry, is he being sarcastic? And the answer is yes, I am being sarcastic. So the reason I had to preface all of that is because a lot of the times the conversation surrounding political correctness is people who are offending others or are being derogatory, being racist, transphobic, whatever, you name it. They're being malicious towards somebody else, and they want an excuse to gaslight your feelings or the person that they're being malicious towards. Like, they want to gaslight their feelings, so they call it, oh well, you're just being sensitive and it's just PC culture. And no, it doesn't work like that. The reason I went through that discussion was to highlight the fact that times change, things evolve, things do not stay the same, people do not stay stagnant, which means that ideas and concepts and ideologies and morale should also, evolve and change, because the same policies and the same ideas and the same that worked in 1990 does not work now. So of course notions of gender, race, sexuality, even biology are light years different. If you go back 100 years, 200 years, I mean, people really used to think that, the earth is the center of the universe. So I don't really subscribe to the idea that we have to stay stagnant in thought. I constantly am changing opinions, because there's constantly new information to be found out. So there's really a sense of people just wanting an excuse to be lazy in thought, which I think is a huge issue in our society. And this is just highlighted like time and time again with examples of older white men, older white women that will say, well, people are just sensitive nowadays. People of color are sensitive. Black people are sensitive. Mexicans are sensitive. No, we're not sensitive. You guys have just been bigoted and derogatory and racist for far too long. And the truth of the matter is that we, as people of color, are slowly but surely, as the decades have rolled along, have been gaining more and more social and economic power and status in society, to where we are now able to voice our opinions and our opposition to the racism and the bigotry that is seen day in and day out. We now have the opportunity to say something about it, with the possibility that there may be repercussions for the people that have these that commit these transgressions. And relating that to the topic of political correctness, because what I was just talking about is more of a larger issue, but the truth of the matter is that these institutions, the institutional racism of this country is so far reaching that it really does invade everything. So yes, it does affect speech, it does affect media, it affects TV, music, culture, everything. So yes, the problem needs to be fixed from the root, to the leaves. So if you want to go top down or down up, either way, it's all got to be changed. So that's why, for instance, talking about TV specifically, shows that had depictions of people of color in negative lights and used cheap stereotypes as comedy bits, or in comedy specials nowadays, you're not going to see the same kind of jokes. You're not gonna, well, I hope you wouldn't be seeing white people make jokes about minorities and gay people where we're the butt of the joke, and instead of punching up, they're punching down. Because that's in essence in comedy what the problem is that it's a cheap joke. You are a white person, be it a white woman or a white man, you hold in society, you hold social privileges and a status that is upheld by the institutions of this country. You are upheld to have a higher status than minorities. So for you to punch down, it's just lame. It's just whack. That's pretty much what it begins and ends with. So it's more funny for you to find a way to be intricate about it and punch up and have comedy that does that. It's like white people have a whole bunch of funny stuff to be talking about. They do a lot of funny stuff. We all do funny stuff. Find the funny, Don't use us as your jokes, And that conversation then extends into the LGBT community when we're discussing them also. It's like you don't say the things and you don't address people in the same way that you used to, because before you could be openly homophobic and now it's deemed not appropriate because it was never appropriate. It was never okay. We were just a more homophobic society. And that's just the truth. As societies get less racist, less homophobic, less misogynistic, less classist, as time goes on, and hopefully as more time goes on, we become a more accepting, progressive, and respectful society, that we're going to start seeing these things less and less, and comedy will change. We are always going to want to laugh. We are always gonna be laughing. So there's always gonna be people that are gonna find ways to make us laugh, and those are the people that we should be looking towards. We should not be referring back and saying, well, that was funny then, so that needs to stay funny. Those kinds of people don't exist anymore. The people in the 90s, they don't exist. People in 2021 are thinking differently, are moving differently, and are different people, and that's okay. Everything has its moment. And thank God we're moving forward for the betterment of everybody. Now, I'm sure we've all have had moments where we go, oh, well, somebody's just being sensitive. And while that may be true, sometimes people may be sensitive, I think it's important to maybe have a little bit more empathy and compassion and think about, are they being sensitive because of something that I am actually doing? Or is there feelings that they are having? And to know the difference, and to spot the difference, because somebody might just be triggered, but sometimes we may be doing something triggering, and what I mean by that is, like, we may be saying something malicious. We may not think it's malicious, but that could be because of an ignorance on our part. So for example, if you say something derogatory, like saying referring to a trans individual by their wrong gender, if you do that mistakenly and they correct you, they give you the courtesy to correct you so that you can address them properly, and then you take it upon yourself to once again misgender them, you are the offender. Now, if you do not know somebody and you refer to them in a specific gender, and they blow up on you by some weird notion or idea that they blow up on you, then that could be an instance where you didn't necessarily do anything wrong, and somebody had a sensibility to an instance. There's a difference, and I think it's important to spot the difference, and those come in many facets. Sometimes I would say a lot of the times there's just blind spots that we have. There's always instances and areas where we could be growing and challenging ourselves, if we're staying stagnant, if we think the same thing too long. And this also is seen like with our parents. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely have seen my parents change over time as far as their political ideology is concerned. Without getting too deep into it, my mom used to be a Republican, and this is a woman who is a immigrant from Mexico who was a registered Republican for a long time. And I think actually since she became a U.S. citizen, she was a registered Republican. I think up until maybe Obama second term. I'm not entirely sure, but I want to say it was right around that area. So it's only as of the last maybe 10, 12 years where she's really evolved in her politics. And I think that's also been seen and moved by the evolution of societal issues as far as race, sex, gender, civil rights, human rights, gay rights, all of that. It's been more pushed to the forefront of our lives because we're seeing just how much it really does affect us, and it's being reinforced to us by what wasn't taught to people and is now able to be seen on the internet. But it's also the boldness with which the opposition has found itself. Like let's just think about it. I think about when I was a little kid, I'm not sure that politics was a discussion about human rights and civil liberties as much as it was about difference of economic opinion. And that could be just because the institutions were doing such a good job of hiding the issues and silencing voices of people drawing issue with a lot of societal norms. So, of course, everybody's always been fighting for civil liberties and fighting for justice since, the dawn of time. But I guess as the internet has really magnified our issues, we're almost being forced to change and evolve at the rapid rate that the information is coming to us. And while it may seem jarring and it may seem like too much at one time, we need to think about it's always been too much. And we just had the privilege to be ignorant about it. And I think that's where a lot of people are. I know that's where my mom is now. She knows now that she wasn't taught a lot. And I know, speaking on her behalf, from what she's told me, it makes her angry that she didn't know more sooner. And she wished she would have, because there's a lot of things that maybe she wouldn't have put up with or tolerated, because when you know better, you do better, Now, I know that a lot of people toe the line with political correctness, not out of respect, but out of fear of what's now being called the whole cancel culture and the idea of cancel culture, which frankly I don't agree with, because no one's really canceled, especially people on the internet and popular figures. When you have a certain amount of wealth and notoriety and popularity, there's very little that can really affect you. Yes, you've seen instances of popular figures and celebrities being quote unquote taken down, but at the end of the day, when they're making millions of dollars or they have millions of dollars in the bank, they have a name they really canceled? Do they really are, did the beast really get slain? Not really. The topic is being discussed, or take for instance this whole Sharon Osbourne mess that went on. Yes, that lady was quote unquote canceled. She was taken off that show. She was ridiculed online, rightfully so, but she got a huge settlement out of that. And that's because there are institutions and there are things in place. There are things set up to always make sure that at the end of the day, the opposition is good, And while some may argue that it's a lot of the times it's just, companies needing to back themselves, like CBS, for instance, Viacom needs to back themselves, so they ensure talent and whatnot. So that's probably why she got paid out. But it's another maybe interesting thing to think about is, should we have a society where somebody can be so like obtuse and racist on live TV and berate a woman, an accomplished black woman who is her peer, Cheryl Underwood? Should that woman then be allowed to leave the show with millions in her pocket, or should the contract be thrown out? What is the right answer to that? Because the shoe could be on the other foot and somebody could be addressing a white person for their, let's say that the roles were reversed and Cheryl was coming at what's her name? Sharon Osbourne. I already forgot. That Cheryl was coming after Sharon and telling her this and that, you did blah 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 blah. We wouldn't want Cheryl to be fired for her views. So I guess that's where the leeway is in society, that the shoe needs to be able to fit on the other foot. The binary always needs to be there. But so I guess in summation for this topic, I'm of the mindset that political correctness is, while I'm not sure if I like the term, I agree with it. I uphold it, and I think it's the right thing to do. I think people should be okay with respecting people, because in essence that's what I think it is. I'm not going to say derogatory things about black people, about Asian people, about women, about anybody. That's not warranted. You don't come to people with disrespect and expect to be respected. It just doesn't make any sense. That's not what they teach little kids. That's not how things work. You need to respect people. You need to respect people's pronouns. You need to respect people, their boundaries, their limits, and people get to set that. And I think the more that we become more respectful, the more that we're going to become tolerant of others. And frankly, like, the biggest thing is just like, mind your business, don't go out of your way to do things. And a lot of the times that's what people are trying to do. They're trying to be malicious. They're trying to go out of their way to do something and see how far they can push the envelope. The whole idea of people are really trying to come at you some kind of way, like, sideways. There's this really popular TV show on Telemundo that I like to watch, that my mom actually introduced me to, which is basically like a Judge Judy type show, but it's basically in Spanish. The woman is super charismatic, and one of her punchlines, or one of her taglines rather, is respete para que te respeten, which means respect so that you could be respected. And it's so true. It's so true. You want to be respected, you got to give that. And I think that a lot of people try to be disrespectful, or are easily fall into disrespect as like a default setting. And I think we need to come at people with more compassion, more empathy, and just nicer, you know? Like when you go out, like you be nice to the people that work at the stores, especially in times like this when we're in a pandemic. It's like people are risking their lives to be employees of these places, and then we go out of our ways to treat them badly. We have instances where there's instances where you see people in stores in the middle of the pandemic being racist to employees, being homophobic, being sexist. It's ridiculous. Like, how are you that kind of person? And I think that more of the times we need to think about political correctness in our everyday life. Are we being correct? Are we being respectful? Are we being polite? And not doing it just for the optics, but because we really want to be respectful. And I think having a spirit of wanting to be respectful, you're going to be respected more. Because I don't think that people deep down really respect evil people or disrespectful people. But people do respect someone's ability to be kind in an unkind world. So I think we had a pretty good discussion this week on the podcast. I liked the topic a lot. There's a lot to be said still, of course. So I would love to hear what you all have to say about it. I would love to hear people who disagree, people who want to add or build onto points. I always think that's important. Just to keep the conversation going. What are examples that you guys have seen where you agree or maybe where you disagree with political correctness? I know we touched on a lot of different things. So I think it's time to move into the Love That segment. So for this week's Love That segment, it's kind of a multifaceted one. I was seeing on Twitter something that's trending is everyone's going gaga for Lady Gaga's album Art Pop, that was released like 2013, 14, something like that. It was a while ago. And it was deemed at the time like a total flop, and it was like the worst thing ever, blah 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 blah. Everyone hated it. I remember at the time I was like really big Gaga fan, and I liked the music because I thought it was great gym music, because it was like very EDM house vibes, you know. But I at the time I honestly didn't understand why it wasn't super popular with everybody, because I felt like it sounded normal in the range of what she was doing, like, to be honest. And it was actually one of the more palatable albums to me, because it felt like it was just like a party album, like a fun album, versus like her other stuff. There was like more of a mix. There was like ballads, there was like, but I remember really liking that album because I could put it on and let it play through pretty much for like the gym or something like that, or like I could add the majority of the songs to a playlist. But it got me thinking, because the reaction now, people are saying that they loved it and that they should have given it its flowers when it first came out. And this is all in relation to, there was a story that apparently there's like a part 2 to the album. There's more songs and people wanted, and people are saying, dang, we should have like been more appreciative, and we maybe should have said that the album was good, and we should have, you know, I guess basically they missed the mark on that. But it got me thinking about albums that people might not like or may not know about, that just go under the radar, but they're albums that like I love. So I thought that was an awesome topic. So I wanted to talk about this week, on this week's episode, I wanted to make the Love That segment, I wanted to make it about albums that I love, and albums that I continuously love since I've heard them and continue to listen to, even though they've probably never been played on the radio. So the first album I want to talk about is Banks's last album, which was 3. And I say that reluctantly because I'm not entirely sure if that's the name of of the album, but on the cover it's like the tallies, and there's like 3, so I think it's like 3. But anyways, I love that album. I am a huge fan of Banks. I've pretty much been into Banks, the artist, pretty much since the very beginning. I was a huge fan of her second album. I mean, her first album is a classic though, to be honest, but her second album to me was just even better than the first one. Her second album was The Altar, that was released in 2016, and it's really, really good. Her music is very like alternative. It's like futuristic kind of vibe, more like ominous, like dark, like very like Matrix kind of thing. She's very cool, very like different, like alternative white girl. But I just love her. I think she's super talented, and I love her visuals, and I love the way that she sings, and I like the choices that she makes with her music. That to be said, I loved her last album. I thought it was super good, and I thought it would be the one that would get her the Grammy nomination, because I just thought it was a really good body of work. I thought the art direction for it was really good. I thought the songs, the album as a whole, I felt, while maybe people may not think it was her best, I felt like it was the most radio friendly it's been. Some of my favorite songs on the album, well, some of the really popular songs on the album, which are the ones that are starred by, you know, Spotify and by Apple Music, are Contaminated and Stroke, which are really, really good songs. Contaminated is like a very like very beautiful, dark, slow song, and Stroke is very sexy, kind of like robotic. It's a really good album to like listen to and to have it as like in the background, because the vibe is just, it's a cool vibe. It takes you to different places. It's very hypnotic. It's very, very cool. Some of my favorite songs were If We Were Made of Water. It's a beautiful slow song. And what I love about her is just honestly her artistry, because she goes out of her way to make really good live performances. And there's live performances of records from this album. And she also did a live performance on YouTube, which is really good. But honestly, I just think that one of the most pretty songs on there was Hawaiian Mazes. I think it's the picture that she kind of paints with her lyrics that's really inviting, and that I really appreciate as somebody who loves lyrics and loves learning lyrics. I think the way that she fits words into the melodies is really interesting. Kind of gives me like Sia vibes with fitting certain words into places where you thought that maybe they wouldn't. She is one of those artists where sometimes you kind of are like, what is she saying, because of the way that she sings, but stylistically I'm okay with that, so you know, just be warned. But another one that I want to talk about, and this is maybe an artist that might be a little bit more known, maybe, I'm not entirely sure to be honest, but who is absolutely one of my favorite artists and who I listen to all the time. But I just felt like this album was severely underrated, and it got, you know, pushed under all of the mess of what was 2020 and the beginning of the pandemic. But this album just like got me through last year. It was just, it's an amazing album. Literally all the songs are good. I love all of them. I mean, I have my favorites, but they're just all so good for so many different reasons. And that album is It Was Divine by Alina Baraz. I love Alina Baraz. I love her voice. I love her. She's beautiful. Just to be honest, I'm like low-key in love with her. She's just beautiful. And her voice is heavenly. Her lyrics, the instrumentals on this album are so good. It's so dreamy. Like, honestly, it's beautiful chill music. It's beautiful vacation music. It's beautiful pool music, lounging. Definitely not like a party but maybe a cute dinner or like a moment, it's just beautiful. I love this album. Some of the super popular songs off the album are Off the Grid with Khalid, who I think she's had on every project that she's released. And then another really popular song is More Than Enough, which is one of the best songs on the album. Honestly, like, even the opening is good. Like, My Whole Life is amazing. Morocco with Black is amazing. Frank is great. Endlessly is beautiful. Give Me the Wheel. To Me was the single that was released a couple months before, which was amazing. There's another really great song that wasn't put on this album, but that was like an amazing single that she released. It was like maybe a teaser track, I guess, and it was called Trust, which is beautiful. So if you love the album, you're gonna love that song. Memo Blue is a beautiful song. It's just an amazing album. I think you guys need to do yourselves a favor and just listen to it. It's amazing. You're gonna love me for it. If you didn't love me for the discussion, you're gonna love me for the recommendations with the music. And with all that being said, I think that brings us to the end of another episode of the Love That podcast. My name is Diego, and I want to thank you all for listening in once again. I hope to be back with you guys next time, where we have another discussion. I'm going to try my very hardest to make it a lot more lighter. But sometimes the world is a heavy place, and as of late, that's how it's gone. So you kind of just got to ride the wave. Until next time, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in the next one.